It's already 9:02. Excellencies, dear colleagues, I am very pleased to welcome you all to the third and final integration dialogue that I am convening in preparation of the 2021 integration segment of the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations. First, a few housekeeping announcements. I would like to inform you that this meeting is being recorded. I would also like to request all participants to keep their microphone muted when you are not speaking. I request the lead agency and moderator and panelists to please keep their camera on throughout the meeting while keeping their microphone off, except when they have the floor. Well, it's a great pleasure, distinguished participants. Today, as I mentioned, is our third and last integration dialogue. We will focus on human well-being and capabilities, building back more resilient, healthy, equitable, and sustainable societies. We have the honor of having the FAO as both the lead entity and the moderator for this dialogue to set the stage. We are looking forward to this dialogue being as successful as the first two dialogues, which demonstrated the integrated and interlinked nature of the Sustainable Development Goals and the three dimensions of sustainable development. Human being and capabilities, which is our focus today, is one of the entry points identified in the 2019 Global Sustainable Development Report, the GSDR. And as the GSDR points out, it is key to the overarching mission of eradicating poverty in all its forms and manifestations and reducing inequalities to leave no one behind. Integrated policy frameworks are at the heart of realizing the 2030 agenda. That's why we're talking about integration dialogues. This is not by chance. Integrated strategies and policies are meant to break silos, to generate positive impacts and co-benefits in related sectors, increase coordination among various actors, and instill multidimensional approaches. These approaches are crucial at a time when we look for sustainable and resilient recovery strategies that also set inclusive and effective paths towards the achievement of the 2030 agenda. We have to face reality, and reality says that no recovery is possible without vaccines for all. This is the shared huge challenge for the international community in this very moment. The Economic and Social Council was given the Charter mandate to coordinate the work of the entire UN system, including the specialized agents in the economic, social, health, cultural, educational, and related matters. It is a powerful role which should be used to provide the solutions to economic, social, health, and related global problems that the Charter speaks about. The pandemic brought to the spotlight the importance of human well-being and capabilities and its interlinkages with all the SDGs. It revealed the exacerbated existing inequalities, including the digital divide and discrimination based on gender, race, age, disability, economic status, and minority and migratory status. The pandemic will have long-lasting implications, not only on health, but also on education, on food security, livelihoods, and sustainable developments, unless we take coherent and decisive action now. Currently, countries are at different stages of the pandemic and recovery. They are facing challenges, uncertainties, and trade-offs in their efforts to stop the pandemic and recover better that are also making substantial inequalities within and among countries evident. One thing is clear for all of us. The Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development, which is with its guiding principle of leaving no one behind, is without a doubt our blueprint for recovery that needs to be people-centered while building back more resilient, more healthy, equitable, and sustainable societies. We need to leave no one unvaccinated behind. This must be the United Nations priority because we cannot recover if we do not have ensure the access to vaccines for everybody. Today, I have the pleasure we are joined by distinguished panelists who will keep us unpack these issues to identify these key policy solutions from the perspective of their work. And without further delay, I would like to invite our moderator, Ms. Beth Bechdol, the Deputy Director General of the Food and Agricultural Organization, FAO, to take the lead. And I thank you very much, Ms. Bechdol, and to FAO for helping us with this innovative dialogues, because we are innovating and we are giving ECOSOC, we're trying to give ECOSOC new life, new role, and new approaches, but not doing business as usual. It's what we really need in this moment. Thank you so much. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Sandoval, for, first of all, the invitation to be a part of this very important dialogue, and to you as well for the leadership in hosting this series. I am especially pleased at your last comment about the importance of finding new, innovative, and collaborative ways to address a number of these very important topics. And I'm pleased very much to have the role today of guiding and moderating and also doing some scene setting for today's interactive discussion with our distinguished panelists. I would just remind the colleagues to make sure that lines are muted to ensure that we don't have background noise that will always make the delivery of remarks all that much more seamless. Our panelists today will assist me in looking at this very important issue of building back more resilient, healthy, equitable, and sustainable societies from a number of different angles. But before I introduce them, I would ask that you allow me to make some introductory remarks on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on agri-food systems, food security, and the related effects on human well-being and livelihoods, and most importantly, some suggestions on how to respond. Government lockdowns in response to the COVID-19 pandemic caused shocks to many sectors, including global food and agriculture, putting livelihoods very much at risk, reducing the incomes of many households and their access to food, especially in rural areas. Worldwide, over 4 billion jobs and livelihoods are related to food systems, and over 1.5 billion are now considered at risk because of the pandemic. Small and medium agri-food enterprises suffered reduced sales, and the pandemic also created significant labor market challenges in terms of increased underemployment and unemployment. Agriculture, forestry, and fishing all experience negative growth rates of working hours and employment, with a disproportionately high impact on the most vulnerable workers, including youth, women, informal workers, migrants, and seasonal labor. The pandemic and the related containment measures have also aggravated the impact of already pre-existing drivers of fragility and food insecurity around the world. Even before the COVID-19 pandemic, estimates have suggested that nearly 690 million people worldwide are hungry, almost 10% of the global population. The pandemic very well has pushed an additional 132 million people into chronic hunger in 2020. We all know we are off track to reach SDG 2, and that was before COVID-19 pushed us even further back. So what can be done? Let me offer 3 considerations that may contribute to our discussion today. First, we need to build to transform during our COVID-19 response and recovery efforts so that agri-food systems become more efficient, more inclusive, more resilient, and more sustainable for better production, better nutrition, a better environment, and a better life. all while ensuring that we leave no one behind to achieve the SDGs by 2030. This will require concerted efforts on many fronts. This may include policy actions that step up public and private sector investments with significant policy coherence, including more nutrition-sensitive investments. This might also include policy measures to keep international food trade open and to improve the efficiency of internal trade and marketing mechanisms in countries to reduce the cost of nutritious foods and determine the affordability of healthy diets for both urban and rural consumers. Second, this pandemic has also emphasized the need for a green recovery, particularly relevant again to the agri-food system. We need to invest in green recovery of food systems to address both food security and well-known climate risks. FAO has already integrated green recovery into our COVID-19 response and recovery program, and we continue to work with other UN entities to offer integrated solutions of green recovery models for agri-food systems. We are currently collaborating with UNDP, UNEP, and other partners to mainstream green and regenerative solutions into national response and recovery efforts. And we have joined with UNEP and UNDP as well in collaborating with multilateral financial institutions, such as the Green Climate Fund and the Global Environmental Facility, GCF and GEF, to support governments' access to climate and environmental finance. Third, the pandemic has highlighted the importance of promoting stronger social policies for addressing the needs and the rights of the poor and the most marginalized. We need to promote a people-centric approach, as you said, to protect the most vulnerable communities affected by the pandemic and build the resilience of family farmers and small-scale producers. We need to promote policies that enhance employment and income-generating activities, including decent rural jobs for youth, and also promote nutrition-sensitive social protection programs. And we need to position human rights at the center of the food system's transformation. And last but not least, I think it is important that we pay priority attention to the informal sector, where limited social protection programs, including insurance and employment guarantees, existed to buffer the impact of income shocks. Finally, as I close, let me share just a few ways in which FAO and many partners are taking these and other solutions forward. First, we need to promote further innovations and digital technologies in both emergency and non-emergency responses. Here at FAO, tools such as digitalization at scale of cash transfers and e-incentives can provide small-scale farmers access to a range of inputs currently out of their reach. Second, we must provide continuous support to countries to ensure the continuity of the critical food supply chain for the most vulnerable populations in particular. 24 million acutely food insecure people threatened by COVID-19 impacts have already received emergency livelihood support and scaled up cash transfers in the 34 focus countries under the Global Humanitarian Response Plan. And we all must continually focus on scaling up data and analytics to improve our response to COVID-19 and beyond, and also to fully integrate our solutions into policy and technical support. The most specific example I can give here at FAO is our country-led and country-owned hand-in-hand initiative, which uses data and modeling to provide a comprehensive view of economic need and economic opportunities with a particular eye toward identifying employment and income generating activities. These are just some of a very long and still growing inventory of challenges and opportunities surfaced from the pandemic. As the pandemic has revealed many of the fragilities of our agri-food system, and with all eyes on this year's Food Systems Summit, There couldn't be a better time for an important dialogue such as this one. I will stop here and would now like to pass the virtual floor to our 5 distinguished panelists to kick off our interactive discussion. They will each have 5 minutes, and following that, we will move to the interventions of other participants. And if you would like to take the floor following the panelists' comments, please follow the instructions that have already been posted in the chat box. So let me proceed by moving to our first panelist, His Excellency Ambassador Eric Tiare. Ambassador Tiare is the chair of the 54th session on the Commission on Population and Development. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Yuan, Excellencies, distinguished delegate, I'm honored to contribute to this third integration dialogue on human well-being and capabilities, building back more resilient, healthy, equitable, and sustainable societies. I will seek to address the question included in the concept note with a specific focus on SDG 1, no poverty, SDG 2, zero hunger, and SDG 3, good health and well-being. I will try to identify key policy options, and concrete examples of integrated policies to inform the deliberations next month. First, on working towards sustainable food system, the Commission on Population and Development observed that the current global food system is environmentally unsustainable, with major impacts on ecosystem, biodiversity, and climate. Population growth and rising incomes will be important drivers of increased food and consumption in many countries. The Commission called for transforming food systems to make them more sustainable and resilient, and emphasizing that the promotion of sustainable food systems and agricultural production are key elements for the eradication of poverty. The Commission called for action to enable access to safe, sufficient, affordable, nutritious, and diverse food and healthy diet for all. Second, on ensuring the exclusivity of recovery strategies and policies, the Commission found that the COVID-19 pandemic had further deepened the situation of vulnerable experiences by women and girls, undermining their access to food and disrupting important antenatal and postnatal services. It was recommended that governments ensure universal access to high-quality social services that allow vulnerable populations to develop the human capital required to raise their lifetime earning potential. Women, young people, and older persons should have access to land, inheritance, capital, training, services, and technologies. The Commission's call for access to safe and nutritious food for all, including women, children, adolescents, and youth, older persons, indigenous people, local communities, rural populations, and rural producers, displaced persons, refugees and migrants, the urban and rural poor, persons with disabilities, people living with HIV/AIDS, and those living in vulnerable situations. Those enduring humanitarian crisis, the adverse effects of climate change or economic shocks should also be included in efforts to end hunger and malnutrition. Third, achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls are crucial to the full implementation of the ICPD Program of Action and the 2030 Agenda. The Commission highlighted the importance of women's equal access to quality equal education at all school level and lifelong learning. This theme will be the subject of in-depth consideration in 2023 when the Commission will consider the special theme of population, education, and sustainable development. Fourth, on accelerating member state efforts toward recovery and achieving the 2030 agenda, let me raise the issue of following up on our commitments. For instance, even though the 54th session of the Commission on Population and Development has adopted a very substantive resolution on its theme of population, food security, nutrition, and sustainable development, the Commission has no mechanism to ensure a stock taking of implementation down the road. As suggested by some member states, adding a secondary theme to the Commission's program of work consisting of a review of progress in implementation of an early theme would enrich the annual session while also promoting accountability. Lastly, it may be beneficial to encourage functional commissions to identify synergies and to promote joint actions. For example, the CPD could contribute to deliberations on demographic statistics in the Statistical Commission and to discussion on people in vulnerable situations in the Commission for Social Development. Similarly, discussion in other subsidiary bodies could be informed by a fuller understanding of demographic megatrends and by the analysis of by population data disaggregated by age, sex, and other relevant characteristics. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for those very clear points and for the emphasis on ensuring that we accelerate so many of our important efforts, and especially, I think, your emphasis on the need for improved statistical and analytical support to our collective efforts. Thank you again for being with us. I would now like to turn to our next panelist, Peter Major. Peter is the chair of the Commission on Science and Technology for Development. Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Beth. Excellencies, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to present the highlights of the 24th session of the Commission on Science and Technology for Development, which is held from the 17th to the 21st May, on the role of science, technology, and innovation, STI, in a sustainable recovery from COVID-19, especially using STI to close the gap on SDG 3, good health and well-being. In these challenging times, a whole range of COVID-19 related interventions clearly illustrated the importance of STI, from genome mapping, diagnostics, contact tracing applications, and disease monitoring to treatments and vaccines. Vaccine development typically used to take a decade or longer. However, using breakthrough technologies, researchers and pharmaceutical companies developed COVID-19 vaccines at a remarkable speed in less than a year. With the accelerating rollout of vaccination programs across the countries, chances are increasing for economic and social life to gradually return to normal. Meanwhile, during the pandemic, ICTs have played a crucial role in enabling continuity in education. In so doing, they have accelerated digitalization and the transition to an information society. Increased demand has put greater pressure on communication infrastructures. Remarkably, networks have proven more resilient than expected, and the internet has resisted the huge surges in traffic due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic showed the immense potential and promise of digital technologies, not only in healthcare and education. They enabled countries, communities, and individuals to maintain socio-economic activities despite lockdowns and social distancing. For healthcare beyond the pandemic, it is predicted that the digitalization of healthcare, which was accelerated during the pandemic, will completely change this sector in the next 10 years. Telemedicine, remote care, and mobile health, including the home monitoring of vital signs and medication adjustments, have reduced costs and improved safety in healthcare delivery. The application of big data and artificial intelligence are enabling complex clinical decision-making and the identification and reporting of health emergencies. Finally, new technologies such as 3D printing have revolutionized the manufacture of medical and assistive devices and equipment. However, healthcare innovation ecosystems that are essentially adapting these technologies to local conditions face enormous challenges in developing countries. Innovation systems lack enabling policies, funding, skills, physical infrastructure, ICTs, and more. Internet access is a key infrastructure for digital health, and it has been mentioned that we have this digital divide, which is widening. But this also requires reliable electricity access, regulative frameworks that enable the use of digital health, and establishing appropriate laws on data protection and privacy are also necessary. A whole of government and multi-sectoral approach is needed to ensure that STI policies are consistent with the national health priorities and sustainable development strategies. While the focus is rightly so on the COVID-19 pandemic, we should not forget about other diseases that disproportionately affect poor people, especially in developing countries. The #1 leading cause of death in low-income countries is neonatal conditions, with diarrheal diseases, malaria, tuberculosis, HIV/AIDS in the top 10. Research and development have made significant contribution to the treatments of these diseases, but more efforts are needed if we want to see them disappear from our world. We need to address inequalities to the access to technologies because they impact health and well-being and almost all other SDGs. As witnessed during this pandemic, when the international community comes together, solutions can be found for global health challenges in record time. We need to use this moment in time to bring attention to other critical diseases and develop affordable vaccines, treatments, and innovative delivery methods. International collaborative arrangements should seek to foster equitable relations between the collaborating parties through partnerships towards a common goal. We should consider joint ownership of intellectual property, IP rights, the issue of licenses, either paid or unpaid, for equitable use of IP rights, a waiver of IP rights barriers, or enabling open access for scientific collaboration during global health challenges. Other areas of cooperation include privacy and data protection, cybersecurity, and ethical frameworks for frontier technologies such as artificial intelligence and gene editing. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, the 24th session of the CSCD recommended more equitable access to scientific knowledge and technologies, including digital technologies, to close the gap on SDG 3, good health and well-being, strengthening national innovation systems, promoting international cooperation, and the commitment to global solidarity are critical enablers for ensuring that healthcare technologies are accessible for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, for those important reflections on the importance of the equitable access to technologies and innovation, and the need, as we have stressed, and I think we'll continue to hear, for the promotion of more international cooperation in so many of these important areas. Let me now turn to our next panelist. Ingrid van den Berge is the co-chair of the 10th session of the Committee of Experts on Global Geospatial Information Management. Ingrid, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Beth. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ambassadors, distinguished guests, first, let me say hello to all you participants from all over the world. I hope that you, your families, and your collaborators are well in these difficult times. And if this is not the case, I hope that things evolve in the best possible ways. It is a privilege for me to participate in this dialogue here on behalf of the Committee of Experts on Global Geospatial Information Management. Geospatial information describes the location of where all things are and provides the digital connection between people, the place, their activities, and their environment. Comprising both data and enabling technologies, geospatial information touches many sectors and thematic areas across the entire development paradigm. Due to its cross-cutting nature, geospatial information is integrative, innovative, and comprehensive. However, we see that there is still a lack of awareness of the power of geospatial information or the critical value gained from combining and integrating this location-based data with many other data types, including, for example, statistics. I could say that geo is the glue to stick all data together. Further, we often hear that there is a lack of reliable data to measure SDG progress, that there are constant data gaps. The COVID-19 pandemic has reinforced that, as with the SDGs themselves, the most vulnerable countries continue to face the greatest challenge in collecting, analyzing, maintaining, and using timely and reliable data, including geospatial and other location-based data. But this is changing. Geospatial information can bridge the digital data gap across many communities and sectors. There are new opportunities for member states to acquire and manage data and to strengthen their geospatial capabilities to achieve a more comprehensive and integrated data approach through the implementation of the frameworks and methods that have been developed by the Committee of Experts on Global Geospatial Information Management, or UNGGIM, like we say. The United Nations Integrated Geospatial Information Framework, or IGIF, is one such globally adopted framework. The IGIF, now being implemented in many member states, creates an enabling environment where national governments can coordinate, develop, strengthen, and promote the efficient and effective use and sharing of geospatial information for policy formulation, decision making, and innovation. For example, a tangible benefit identified in the IGIF is creating greater resilience to disasters, where data sharing and geospatial information are critical. Being able to share integrated geospatial information in real time means the same information will be delivered to all agencies at the same time, and so they will fight the battle off the same map. A practical example to show of ways of geospatial data and tools being applied from the early days of the pandemic was member states making use of highly visual national geospatial dashboards to provide situational awareness to record and report the virus spread. The COVID-19 pandemic as a global disaster reinforced the applicability of our integrated geospatial information framework as an overarching framework. In this case, the role and contribution of geospatial technologies and tools to deliver timely and reliable information for public health and safety in a systematic way across countries and regions was proven. Often in those dashboards that I mentioned, they became the communication interface for the public and for decision makers, and in this way enabled informed decisions, whether it's to stay and shelter in place or to know where virus hotspots were and why. Geospatial information, as I said, provides the glue to bring many elements together and anchor them by location. This is most pertinent in developing countries, which for too long have been left behind. We now have the technology, the tools and methods to bring data in all its forms together to understand where things are happening and to bridge the geospatial digital divide, and in this way build back more resilient, healthy, equitable and sustainable societies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ingrid. I am now going to make sure that I retain the analogy and the metaphor of geo as being the glue. I think you are absolutely correct in thinking about that opportunity to really bring an understanding of real-time scenarios and real-time issues using geospatial data and platforms, and very much appreciate your comments about the relevancy of this in this particular time, because everybody all at one time with the COVID pandemic really needed to understand these different scenarios and different impacts. And the geospatial platforms that have been made available really helped underscore that in this particular setting. Thank you very much for your remarks. I'd now like to turn to Keiko Miwa, Regional Director for Human Development in the Middle East and North Africa with the World Bank. Keiko, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, Excellencies and colleagues. Thank you very much for the invitation to join
Keiko,
this morning.
Can I it's a little difficult to hear you. I'm not sure if the microphone could be turned up just a bit or to speak closer to it.
Okay. Can you hear me any better or not really?
It's very muted.
Switch audio.
It's because she's using the microphone on the earphones. Maybe, I don't know if you can unplug your earphones.
Can you hear me any better? Or it's the same?
The volume is still very low.
I don't usually get that feedback, so I don't know what's happening. I think I might.
Perhaps in the interest of time, we could let you continue to work. We can go to the next panelist and come back to you.
Yeah.
Very good. If I could, let me turn the floor to Mr. Ashraf El Noir, the Director of the International Organization for Migration Office to the United Nations. Ashraf, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Beth. And let me extend my thanks to the chair for convening this dialogue today. I am very pleased to bring a migration perspective to this discussion. And I will start by recalling that as we were getting ready to embark on the SDGs decade of action, COVID-19 broke out and threw a spanner into our works. We were largely caught unprepared, and we have not yet come out completely out of the woods. The ramifications of that are still ongoing, and as a migration agency working with other partners, we need to prioritize the following actions. The first one is to address the human mobility dimensions of the pandemic. Second is to support member states' effort to recover and build better. And third is to move on and put back on track delivery on the SDGs decade of action. I will speak briefly to each one of these three actions, starting with the with the human mobility dimensions. And I could see that there are increased inequalities across the board, and that the gap in income between the poor and the rich is widening. As a result, many people has been disempowered, and that put many of them to be on the move. Of concern to us are migrants and displaced people who have either fall out of the social security networks, or who may have no access or less access to the services and the facilities that could be available. Equally concerning are migrants in vulnerable situations, particularly those who have pre-existing health conditions that put them at more risk for contracting coronavirus pandemic or other infectious diseases. So the bottom line here, we need to see a better and more integrated approach to human mobility and health systems, so that by putting them together in a more coherent way, we could facilitate safe, orderly, and regular migration. The other aspect on this is to recognize that while many migrants were in the front line of the response, working either in the health sector, hospitals, as doctors, nurses, or keeping the economies going, or involved in delivering, essential services, they were among, the celebrated heroes of this response, or at least many of them. But on the other hand, there are others who are less fortunate, who happen to be in situation of vulnerability when the lockdown happened. And here I would point out to those who were in detention centers, those who were in migration dormitories that are not meeting the right standards and not allowing, the right social distancing. And there are also others who happen to be as either refugees or IDPs in camps, and the lockdown does not allow sufficient care and maintenance in terms of service delivery to reach to them. So this is one aspect that we need to address. The third one is obviously is about the stranded migrants, and we could see that by July last year, a total estimated of 3 million people have been stranded. They were in different routes and they missed flights, or they couldn't access borders. But on top of that, they have not been able to access consular services. They have not been able to talk to their consulars in their respective embassies and get the help that they need. Many of these services were not working fully because of the lockdown, and also the communication difficulties with the capitals, etc. On top of that, we see that there were many migrants, although they managed to go back home, they have not been well integrated, not well supported, and still need to be, brought on their feet. So we need to bring attention to the needs of those people. Two quick points on this. One, on the reduced pathways for irregular migration. This is especially hitting those who work in agricultural jobs or those who work on non-agricultural jobs, especially migrants who are part of seasonal migration. Many of that has been reduced. Labor migration quotas are not as what it used to be. So this is one aspect as we try to recover, we need to address. Related to that is the issue of remittances, which has been reduced. At least this is the forecast from the World Bank, that by 2021, this year, they would be reduced by 14% from its previous levels. Lack of jobs, or many of the migrants in the informal sector lost their source of livelihoods. Difficulties in transmitting, money back. So all that contribute to that. Now, on recovering better quickly, I would emphasize 3 actions. First one is access to vaccination. I think the chair has emphasized the importance of vaccination for all migrants should not be left out of the promise of vaccination. IOM, ICRC, and IFRC launched a campaign to advance access to vaccination for people on the move. So we need to make sure that the rollout at the country level, the plans that are there would include migrants, donor support would also take that into consideration. And ensure that an inclusive and equitable approach is done. Second, on this, the socio-economic impact, which the UN, together with member states and donors, are trying to address with focus on vulnerabilities, building the capacity of the health system and livelihood recovery would also benefit migrants. This will help to stabilize situations in places where we could see potential migration. This would help us to avert another, perfect storm where migrants will start walking, in all directions. So we need to make sure that community stabilization, outreach, that the impact of the socio-economic packages would also reach migrants. Last but not least, on this, the aspect of the food insecurity, nutrition, and displacement. This is an important nexus. And if we could look at the figure, we see increased, displacement. Last year, the total of 55 million displaced people has been quoted, according to the International Displacement Monitoring Center, including 48 million related to displacement related to conflict and 7 to natural disasters. So and with that, we see increased in humanitarian assistance, estimated to be 235 million would require humanitarian assistance. So in short, we need to address the nexus between food insecurity, natural disasters, or conflict, but also displacements by and large, and make sure that migration would be part of the adaptation strategies and it's not just a survival option. Last but not least, on moving on and putting back, the SDGs on track, member states has a role, and I think the HLPF should help to renew the commitments of member states, and especially that they work more on national voluntary reviews and ensure that migration is mainstream. Second, we need to see a system-wide, more coherent approach, and IOM as the coordinator of the migration network could play its role. Last but not least is the importance of a whole of government and society approach, especially vis-a-vis addressing discrimination, xenophobia, and stigmatization. I thank you. I'm sorry for being a bit long.
Thank you so much. Well, maybe a few minutes long, certainly very focused and very targeted, and very much advocating for the needs of migrants in these very vulnerable situations. And I really appreciate the very specific points you've raised about ensuring that we mainstream these needs into all of the efforts that are underway. Let me now turn back to Keiko with the World Bank to hear her perspectives. Keiko, over to you.
Sure, thank you. Beth, can you hear me better?
Yes,
or it's the same?
Very well,
okay.
Thank you.
Great. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, Excellencies and colleagues. Thank you very much for the invitation to join this important conversation. And it's a great pleasure for me to share the World Bank's COVID-19 response and approaches for building back, or we would say building forward better for more resilient, healthy, and equitable and sustainable societies. As everyone on the panel mentioned, the COVID poses an unprecedented setback to the global effort and to end extreme poverty and reduce inequality. And the pandemic is pushing more people into extreme poverty, with the total rising to about 150 million people by end of this year. And the pandemic hits the poor and the vulnerable the hardest. And it is affecting every aspect of commercial activities and trade, shrinking GDP and fueling debt crisis. And on education, at the height of the pandemic, 1.6 billion students were out of school and resulting in a loss of more than half a year of learning so far. And health disruption in regular health services and causing many non-communicable and preventable diseases to go untreated, especially in the area of child and maternal health. The World Bank is working with client countries to link immediate COVID-19 responses to a longer-term development objective. Our focus is to help our client countries achieve green, resilient, and inclusive development. And the World Bank's response to COVID-19 is comprehensive across different sectors. However, given the focus of today's discussion, allow me to focus on our health and education engagements. So on health, as mentioned before so many times, COVID-19 vaccines, together with testing, treatment, and strong health systems are critical to protecting lives and stimulating economic recovery. And fair, broad, and fast access to effective and safe COVID-19 vaccine is vital to save lives and strengthen global economic recovery. We have a $12 billion facility to help developing countries purchase vaccines, set up vaccination systems, and move quickly to vaccinate people. We have vaccination programs in 28 countries amounting to 2.7 billion and expects to support 50 countries by the end of June and adding more countries and beyond. With our partners, the World Bank helped more than 140 low and middle income countries identify gaps and assess readiness to safely distribute vaccines. Findings show that 95% of countries have developed national vaccination plans and 78% have safety measures in place. We are scaling up assistance to help countries get ready and to deploy vaccines and strengthen vaccination systems. For example, establishing policies for safe and effective deployment, expanding storage and cold chain systems, and developing tracking systems to make sure vaccines reach people and are distributed as intended, and training health workers and supporting citizens and community engagement. Our COVID response draws on our experience helping developing countries vaccinate against polio, measles, and Ebola. We are helping countries to build more resilient health systems and ready to respond to future health emergencies. Turning to education, an entire generation of students may never achieve their full potential or employment opportunities because of the COVID-19 crisis. This global shock to all education systems is being followed by a deep economic recession, compounding the education crisis. And with the latest GDP projection, close to 7 million students from primary and secondary education could be dropping out of school due to the income shock and the pandemic. And the combination of school closures and the loss of family livelihoods also may leave girls particularly vulnerable. It can also worsen exclusion and inequality in the system, especially for people with disabilities and other marginalized groups. Before the pandemic, the world was already tackling a learning crisis. We estimated about 53% of children, one in every 2 children in low and middle income countries are living in learning poverty. That means when children are born today, when they reach the age of 10, they cannot understand a simple story. And in sub-Saharan Africa, this figure is close to 90% of learning poverty. And we responded to the education crisis caused by the pandemic immediately. Our efforts are reaching over 400 million students and 60 million teachers. For example, in Jordan and Turkey, we are supporting the development of TV and digital content for blended teaching and learning for the new academic year, as well as psychosocial counseling and remedial courses. In Bangladesh and Burkina Faso, Nepal, we are helping developing school safety and hygiene protocols while working with the water and sanitation and hygiene teams to provide basic sanitation and hygiene supplies. In the Sahel region, the World Bank is supporting the Sahel Women's Economic Empowerment and Demographic Dividend Project, aimed at creating a favorable environment for women and girls' empowerment through programs to keep girls in school and to expand economic opportunities and access to quality reproductive health services. The World Bank's support is not just responding to the crisis, but is building back or building forward better so that the systems don't replicate the problems that led to a learning crisis before the COVID-19. We are using this opportunity to shape more resilient education systems that are better prepared to cope with future shocks to ensure opportunities for all. We are helping countries implement multi-platform strategies combining online resource with radio, TV, social networks, and expanding access to printed materials at home. In sum, the World Bank is supporting the countries to recover human capital losses, realign investments in human capital, and reimagine how the human capital and social contract could look like in the new normal. And last but not least, we cannot have an impact if we don't work in partnership with all the stakeholders. So we really look forward to strengthening our partnership with all the UN agencies and beyond. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those remarks and the extra emphasis on both the importance of prioritizing health-related needs, as we have heard from all of the panelists, access to vaccination, education as well. And I think your closing comment on the importance of partnerships is a very important transition to now the next segment of our discussion, which is the interactive aspect. We have a list of a few colleagues who have already expressed interest in taking the floor. There are directions for others of you through the chat to submit your interest in making an intervention. I would just ask to ensure that we hear as many voices as possible and to hopefully give our panelists, before we conclude, one last opportunity for a final reflection, that these interventions be no longer than 2 minutes. And of course, you are also welcome to not only make a comment, but perhaps also pose a question to our panelists. As I have the list, I would like to first turn the floor over to Stephen Barreau, Deputy to the Director, Telecommunication Development Bureau of ITU. Stephen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Excellency, or good afternoon, sorry, or morning, depending on where you are, Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. And thank you to all of the representatives who have already made valuable contributions to this important dialogue today. It's my great pleasure to contribute on behalf of the ITU, the International Telecommunication Union, which is the United Nations Specialized Agency for Information and Communications Technologies. As noted by previous contributors, we continue to live in very challenging times, with the COVID pandemic being far from over. In that context, the importance of connectivity has never been more apparent. The pandemic has demonstrated quite conclusively that ready access to the internet is an unquestionable requirement for fully fledged participation in society and the economy in these times. However, the increased demand has also put significant pressure on the infrastructure underpinning connectivity, highlighting gaps within and across countries and regions. And it has shown us how reliability and resilience of this connectivity are essential to trusted and high quality services across all sectors for all. This is the reason why ITU moved very quickly once the pandemic struck to provide, through several mechanisms, immediate support to countries, helping them to respond to the challenge of COVID as our stakeholders around the world were faced with the same questions. How do we avoid ICT network congestion? How do we connect hospitals, schools? How do we move businesses online? And how do we allow our children to continue education through this difficult time? ITU provided tools to allow countries to learn from numerous counterparts and find solutions that are best adapted to their own context. I'll mention just a few. Our Reg for COVID platform, which is a global network resiliency platform that we launched in April 2020, provides a digital space where information and communication technology regulators, policymakers, and other interested stakeholders share information and view what initiatives and measures have been introduced across the world to help ensure communities remain connected during the crisis. The second phase of this platform initiative focused on preparing the future, with country case studies and a detailed assessment study focusing on the plans that have been prepared and adopted by countries for the post-crisis situation in terms of ICT policies and regulations. Our Connect to Recover global initiative offers countries the opportunity to reinforce their digital infrastructure and ecosystems while providing means of utilizing digital technologies such as teleworking, e-commerce, remote learning, and telemedicine to support the COVID-19 recovery efforts and preparedness for the new normal, and also for potential future pandemics. Where still needed, this also helps to prevent the spread of COVID-19 infections by allowing the continuation of lockdowns and prompt information sharing while maintaining socioeconomic activities. We also prepared and launched new guidelines for development and implementation of national emergency telecommunications plans and other tailored contingency plans. This helps countries to be better prepared to manage their disaster response activities at a time when the frequency, intensity, and the human and economic impact of disasters is on the rise worldwide. Colleagues, our new report, Connecting Humanity, shows that achieving universal access to broadband will require bringing more than 3 billion additional people online in the next 10 years at an estimated cost of $428 billion US. This is an ambitious aim, but it is in no way an unachievable one, and more than ever with COVID, it is a necessary one. This will require strengthened efforts of all stakeholders to reach unconnected communities so that equality of opportunity is finally within the reach of all. Therefore, before I close, let me just draw your attention to an important milestone for meaningful connectivity. In a few months from now, in June 2022, ITU will hold the next World Telecommunication Development Conference at the invitation of the government of Ethiopia. This landmark event seeks to dramatically redraw the digital connectivity roadmap with a view to leveraging the transformational power of digital technology to accelerate progress toward the UN Sustainable Development Goals. I urge all stakeholders, member states, international organizations, private sector, civil society, academia, international organizations to engage in our preparations for this conference and to attend the conference itself. There is no doubt that we are living in unique times of accelerated digital transformation that has been triggered by and is needed as a result of COVID. It is a unique opportunity for strengthened digital development, but also huge responsibilities to ensure that as we do this, no one is left behind. Thank you, Chair, and back over to you.
Thank you, Stephen, very much. Our next intervention is from Simone Cecchini, the Senior Social Affairs Officer speaking on behalf of the Executive Secretary of ECOSOC. Simone, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, today we are talking about how to promote more resilient, healthy, equitable, and sustainable societies, right? However, as you all know, inequality defines our region, Latin America and the Caribbean, in multiple dimensions, including income, gender, age, territory, race, ethnicity, migratory status, disability, and others. That is why at the ECLAC, at times of crisis, we have called for a transformative recovery with equality at the center. In 2020, governments in the region did act to face the COVID-19 crisis. We tracked their actions, and we saw that 263 social protection emergency measures were implemented, such as cash and in-kind transfers, amounting to 86 billion, or 1.5% of regional GDP, and this mitigated the social impact of the COVID-19 crisis, especially the increase in poverty. But we have to look forward, and we need to connect the emergency to the recovery. So as you stressed, Madam Chair, social protection systems are key, and they have a central role to play. And also we need to put emphasis on vaccinating the entire population, which needs international solidarity, and obviously in creating jobs, especially those oriented towards environmental sustainability. In order to promote this comprehensive view of development, I must highlight that in Latin America and the Caribbean, we have an important tool. It's called the Regional Agenda on Inclusive Social Development. It's a technical and political instrument to guide social policies and to support the implementation of the social dimension of Agenda 2030. This agenda was approved by all countries of the region at the Regional Conference on Social Development, which took place in Mexico in October 2019, before the pandemic. The conference is a subsidiary body of the ECLAC. It was created in 2014 by an ECOSOC resolution, and importantly, it's a good example of UN collaboration because it goes together with the UNDP's Ministerial Forum on Development. And Even if it was drafted before the pandemic, it addresses many of the points we're discussing today, and to foster well-being and strengthen capabilities. Especially its right-based approach promotes universal and comprehensive social protection systems and policies for social and labor inclusion, such as health and education. So in closing, let me also highlight that at the ministerial meeting that we held in January, in the midst of the pandemic, countries confirmed their commitment to the regional agenda on inclusive social development. Thanks a lot, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those very succinct and very important contributions. Let me now turn to Dr. Shokat Abdul, Director of Technical Cooperation for the Africa Division of the IAEA. Dr. Abdul, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator and Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I have an honor to participate in this very important forum and be able to present some of our work here at the IAEA. Emanating from its motto, Atoms for Peace and Development, the IAEA really contributes to achievements of the 9 of the 17 SDGs. And because of time, Madam Chair, I'm just going to give you some few examples and we'll post the rest of information on the chart. The nuclear science and technology offer a wide range of solutions to challenges concerning food and agriculture. The agency helps member states make use of such benefits, enabling them to make informed, science-based decisions that feed into national policies and strategies. Through an integrated approach, the IAEA assistance has helped to protect food chains from pests, enhance food production, animal production, livestock health, reproduction, nutrition, control animal diseases, enhance agriculture, water and soil management, and of course, very important also, adapt to climate change through smart agriculture. The IAEA assistance has direct impact on people as scientists, consumers, farmers, or traders. As we move forward with the pandemic that we are facing at the moment, in order to support the member states in strengthening their capacities in responding to possible future outbreaks and pandemics of disease, the IAEA has launched a zoonotic disease integrated action, what we call Zodiac. This initiative is actually in partnership with FAO, WHO, and OIE. This is designed to fill the gaps in research and development infrastructure in member states, recognized in one house approach, and of course under the SDG 17 in partnership and collaboration with other partners. Last but not least, I just want to also bring the aspect of the powerful role that science technology can be able to play and how we need to bring our youth and gender as well on the agenda. And it's for this reason that last year the IAEA launched the Marie Sklodowska-Curie Fellowship, which offers grant to young women scientists from developing countries to enable them to continue their higher education in the field related to nuclear science, technology, nuclear safety, security, and non-proliferation. We believe that this in the long term will not only enhance women participation in the nuclear sector, but also improve the quality of human resource and positively contribute in the achievement of more safe, secure, and prosperous world. I thank you, Madam Chair, and pass it over back to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the very important reference to the collaborative work that we do in the area of zoonotic diseases and the reference to the Zodiac program. It's a very important joint collaboration. I'd like to turn lastly to the final intervention before I go back to our panelists for any final thoughts that they might have. To Ambassador Dominika Kroes, the permanent representative of Poland to our UN office in Vienna and chair of the Commission on Narcotic Drugs. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to participate in this integration dialogue of the ECOSOC in my capacity as chair of the 64th session of the Commission on Narcotic Drugs, and to give a certain perspective of the Vienna-based commission. Let me first thank also His Excellency Ambassador Munir Akram, who addressed in his capacity as President of ECOSOC the ceremonial opening segment of the 64th session of the Commission on the 12th of April. So, as you may be aware, the Commission adopted at the last session a statement on the impact of the coronavirus disease pandemic on the implementation of Member States' joint commitments to address and counter all aspects of the world drug problem. This statement has been submitted as our substantive contribution to the 2021 high-level political forum of the Council on Sustainable Development. In this statement, the Commission acknowledged that the traditional demand reduction infrastructure faces increasing challenges due to the pandemic in providing prevention, treatment, care, recovery, rehabilitation, and social reintegration measures, as well as measures aimed at minimizing the adverse public health and social consequences of drug abuse. It's therefore important to develop and implement innovative approaches to drug prevention, treatment, and related health and social services with a view to ensuring efficient and accessible opportunities for treatment and recovery. The pandemic has reinforced once again the need for a global action to ensure that, as you said already, no one is left behind. And this is particularly relevant in the context of the world drug problem. The Commission, at its 64th session, adopted resolution that calls upon Member States to facilitate non-discriminatory access to drug-related prevention, treatment, education, care, sustained recovery, rehabilitation, social reintegration, and support services for people who may face obstacles when accessing those services, including those impacted by social marginalization. And this is indeed innovation from the side of the Commission. The Commission also adopted another resolution 64/2 that encourages Member States to increase efforts in promoting alternative development programs to support populations affected by or vulnerable to the illicit cultivation of drug crops, which may contribute to efforts to build back better from the pandemic. Also adopted at the April session, Resolution 64/3, highlighting, among others, the importance of ensuring non-discriminatory access to treatment for drug use disorders, including for those incarcerated, as well as women, youth, and other vulnerable members of this society. Lastly, let me reiterate that addressing and countering the world drug problem requires coordinated multidisciplinary efforts, including through information sharing. In light of this, the CND will continue facilitating during its thematic discussions in fall this year an interactive exchange of good practices and lessons learned among policymakers, experts, civil society, and academia, including on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the implementation of the international drug policy commitments. Excellencies, let me reassure you that the Commission will continue making an effective contribution towards sustainable and resilient recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic and building an inclusive and effective path for the achievement of the 2030 Development Agenda. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And now, with the time that we have remaining, I'd like to take just a few minutes to go back to our distinguished panelists for one final reflection or comment or point to emphasize based on the perspectives that have been offered by, I think, all of the conversants today. There is a lot here for us to try to distill and digest, but if you could perhaps emphasize one final important point that I think will contribute to, again, our efforts to focus on this building back or building forward, as Keiko had shared with us, it would be a helpful way to conclude our discussion today. So let me perhaps go in reverse order in the way that we had earlier presented. And could I perhaps turn first to Ashraf for a very brief final point to offer? Ashraf? it is possible that our panelists may have had to leave early, so I don't see him here. Let me go next to Keiko. Keiko, over to you.
Okay, can you hear me again?
I can.
Great. So thank you very much. It's been a really enriching to hear all the interventions. So my final thoughts, 3 points. One is technology, as many people emphasized. Before the COVID-19, technology was kind of a nice thing to have for many developing countries, but it made it really clear it's a must-have. It's critical for rebuilding the resilient development path. And second, education. Education is a silent crisis. Nobody dies because of lack of access to education visibly, but it's there. And while we need to focus on the health pandemic crisis, we really need to keep our eye on the ball on making sure that kids are in the schools and learning. Finally, on the health issues, as again, just to emphasize, vaccine is critical, but what's happening, as everyone knows, is a two-tiered status that all the OECD countries have access. Now they're going into the booster shot, whereas the developing countries, on average, it's only 1% of the population getting vaccinated, and even the health workers still don't have access to vaccines. So we really need to address this. So, upfront access, upfront financing for vaccines to developing countries is critical, and it's a global public goods. Making sure that everyone and creating herd immunity is not only beneficial for the developing countries, but globally. So we are all in this together, and we have to do our share. Thank you very much.
You're unmuted.
Sorry, thank you. We all have to be reminded of that. Thank you very much, Keiko, for those concise and very direct points. Ingrid, can I go to you next?
Yes, thank you very much, Beth. I think what I would like to convey as a message is there is a booming technology, and everybody thinks that they are a mapper because they have a GPS on their phone. And it is very important and very useful to use this technology. But what I would like to, in this gremium, stress is the importance of working with authentic data and authentified data. And there, it's important that in the countries there is an authority or an organization which has this as a role and which has to be reinforced, so they can use they can provide you with valuable quality data, which you then don't have to look for, and you can use this data to make your decisions, to make better decisions. So we see that a lot of people lose too much time to look for the data and have not enough time to do something with the data. This is valid for many data, but in geospatial, it's certainly the case. So if I can give you a takeaway is talk to your mapping agency, make sure they can do their job better, and then you will be able to do your job better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ingrid. If I could, I'd like to go back to Peter. Peter, the floor is yours for a final comment.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I will try to approach from the point of view of ECOSOC, and I really welcome the initiative of taking the lead. And basically, since last March, it has been always on my mind, why don't we take the lead? Cooperation is extremely important. We have heard very, very good examples, and I welcome these examples. Especially the concrete one about Zodiac. But probably we should take lead because we are facing global crisis, and global crisis needs global response. And we need to have a holistic approach. And ECOSOC is a very well positioned to take this holistic approach. We have heard very nice examples of tools which are available. We had these tools already in 2018. We have had simulation of the crisis, and probably nobody paid any attention to these simulations. We realize that we have a health crisis, but at the same time, we somehow ignore that we are facing social crisis, we are facing economic crisis, and we are facing all other crises, what you have mentioned. So once again, I welcome cooperation, and I propose that we have a kind of regular framework for this cooperation. All the ECOSOC subsidiary bodies should come together in a regular framework. Probably the ECOSOC leadership will establish some time frame, but this is the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, for that very specific suggestion, and I think one that will be very well received and I hope can be maintained as we all do think about the need for global action. Let me go next to Ambassador Tiare for a final reflection from him, and then we will conclude. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you, moderator. For my final word, I just want to add 3 additional core messages from our commission. First one is to ensure equal opportunities for and promote gender equality and empowerment of women and girls in the leadership and policy.
That's not clear again.
Decision making.
It might have gone.
Ambassador,
you're
your
muted.
microphone is
Sir, we
muted.
can't hear you.
Sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm saying that I want to add 3 additional core messages from our commission. The first one is ensure equal opportunities for and promote gender equality and empowerment of women and girls in leadership and policy decision making, especially in rural contexts, and close the gender gap in access to productive resources in agriculture. The second one is to reduce food losses and prevent and reduce food waste. Third, to provide young people with access to sustainable health and social services without discrimination by paying special attention to nutrition, including eating disorders and obesity. Here are the 3 additional messages I have to add, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador, and thank you again to all of our distinguished panelists for coming back in with some of these thoughtful additions to your initial comments based upon the discussion today. Let me
This
Please.
is Ashraf. Can I take a
Yes, Ashraf, please, a final comment from you, and then we will conclude.
Okay, thank you very much. I will be quick. I think so far we have seen greater solidarity and increased international cooperation in response to the pandemic, and maybe this would give us a great opportunity to take the pandemic into an avenue for us to reimagine the human mobility regime ground up, so that we ensure better integration between the health system and the immigration systems in order to facilitate safe and orderly migration. This is the first point. The second point is to put emphasis on ensuring that there would be an inclusive and equitable approach, particularly to vaccination, and making sure that migrants will not be left out of the promise of vaccination. This is also consistent with the global health coverage commitments by member states. And third is the emphasis on a right-based approach, particularly to address vulnerabilities and marginalization, especially in rural economies. This is a great driver of our migration, and by doing so, we will ensure that migration will be part of the adaptation strategies and not otherwise. I thank you.
Thank you, Ashraf, for coming back in with those closing points of emphasis. We are colleagues at a time to close, and I think Ambassador Sandoval, you have plenty here to work with as a result of this discussion and contemplating next steps. Just let me very briefly, at a very high level, touch on just a few points that I have heard and reflected on here over our 90 minutes together, and then I will turn the floor back to you, Ambassador, to close. But clearly, I think we have all touched on the very far-reaching, deep impacts of COVID-19. We have more poverty, we have more hunger, we have more inequality, and we have all of us a bigger burden to carry together in order to bring global action to this global problem, global set of problems together. I think very clearly we have heard the emphasis that needs to be placed on the promise of equitable access to vaccinations. And that, I think, is increasingly a call to action for all of us as UN agency partners to contemplate and to consider our contributions towards. We recognize there's a very immense challenge of making sure that we leave no one behind, not only as we respond to COVID-19, but as we all are beginning to already transition our thinking to this recovery, to this building back better or building forward. And in that, we cannot lose sight of the poor, the extreme poor, the displaced, Indigenous peoples, women, youth, migrants, people in emergency situations, especially those in rural areas. And our policies and our programs are going to need to be fit to those unique needs. We need to focus on the potential of science, technology, innovation, data, and just simple connectivity. Access is critically important when we talk about technology and innovation. Sometimes it is the most basic of services that many of us here take for granted that we also need to ensure is focused on. And finally, I would just close by the very important comments that have been raised about the need for global collaboration, global action, and our efforts being brought together in a very, I think, coordinated and very holistic, very multi-sectoral way. And to that very point, Ambassador, you bringing this important dialogue together is a very important step in doing that. So thank you for the opportunity from FAO to participate and to serve in a moderating capacity. Thank you to all of the other panelists. Ambassador, let me turn it over to you for closing comments.
No, on the contrary, Beth, it has been an honor to have such a wonderful panel. Your conduction was splendid and your wrap-up was fantastic. Really, I think that you left me very little things to say. I would only like to really congratulate everyone. I think that, you know, ECOSOC has been criticized for many decades of being a rubber stamper or an organ that doesn't have the dynamic or the possibility of really touching in depth the topics that are affecting the world. And now we are changing that reality. We are really doing the difference. And it's because we want it and because we believe in it. So these panels, these dialogues must be just a call of not working business as usual, because our reality is very far from being business as usual. So let's make together, don't leave this just as an anecdotal moment, but really have this intention on making the difference of transforming the bodies of the United Nations that we have and making them really relevant and to improve people's lives, because finally that's the major goal of the United Nations. So saying so, I will read out very fastly my conclusions that are quite similar to your fantastic wrap up. Thank you so much. It was just really, really splendid. But thank you. I would like to thank you and the lead entity FAO, to our moderator Beth Bechdol, and our distinguished panelists, and all of you for participating virtually in this integration dialogue. You have given us a lot of food for thought, and our task is to bring together these key ideas and policy recommendations for integrated solutions to build a more resilient, healthy, sustainable, and equitable future. We need to ensure global connectivity by 2030. It has already been mentioned by the Secretary General, and we need to obtain and use the available data in benefit of people. We really need to cross this information, have these integrated policies with the technological side as an essential cross-cutting element to tackle our goals. One of the lessons of the pandemic has been that health should not be considered a cost to the economy, but an investment in human well-being. Now we have a very cruel reality, what we live in the pandemic. We need to rebuild inclusive societies that are resilient in the face of future pandemics, climate-related events, and other challenges. We must prioritize the most vulnerable and marginalized, as has been mentioned, including migrants that normally they don't belong, they are in no man's land sometimes, and ensure no one is left behind. It is clear that all agencies and organizations, we need to learn from the terrible experience of this pandemic. We need to share our learnings, and we need to develop the best possible integrated policies to be better prepared. But what we have touched today is that we are facing a new dimension of well-being. Well-being, the concept of well-being is not anymore business as usual. It's not the one that we have always think. The scenario has enormously changed. It is clear that the traditional elements of well-being, those related to survival, must be addressed, but the scenario is getting more and more complicated, and now we have to deal with new challenges for ensuring a new human dimension of well-being in the 21st century, because the challenges just have changed. End hunger, access to water, to energy, to health services will always be the core elements of living. But now we need to leave no one unvaccinated behind, not now and not in the future. We need to leave no one unconnected behind, because we are seeing that connectivity is essential in our century, as you just mentioned. So, dear colleagues, we are really making the difference here. This is not business as usual, as I said. I thank your participants in this integration dialogues, in the 3 sessions of the integration dialogues, for making the difference, and especially for feeling the hope of working better or making a real difference. ECOSOC, in its 75th anniversary, is not anymore the traditional body we knew. We are cooking here together an enormous changes through integrated policies, and especially of coordination and information sharing. We are just at the beginning of this new era, and I really hope that this will just grow in favor of the United Nations, in favor of all our countries, and to have the best possible agencies we have. We are just fulfilling the mandate ECOSOC was given in the charter. And if somebody have any doubt, take a look at the charter. So finally, I would like to invite you to the formal integration segment of ECOSOC that will take place on Friday, the 2nd of July, to continue our discussions, building on the integration dialogue conclusions that we are having and that are very rich. I will be sharing the key messages from this integration segment at the opening of the HLPF on July the 6th. And that will give us the opportunity of bringing all these new ideas, these new dimensions to the highest level. We will be there at the HLPF, which is great news for all of us. So I only have to thank you so much for this opportunity, for your participation. It has been extremely rich, and let's make a difference. We can do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for those very candid and very direct and very encouraging words about the impact and the commitment that I think all of us are really beginning to take to move forward on so many of these important points that were made today. Before we close, I am being asked by the colleagues behind the cameras to have all of us turn on our cameras for, I think, a formal capture by photograph of our time together. So if I could ask all panelists and participants to please turn on your cameras so that we can see your faces, and we will hold for maybe just a few seconds. Let me give a few more colleagues the opportunity to come in. See a number of you. Okay, very good. And with that, I would suggest a nice smile and hold it for a moment. And I would say that that probably suffices. Thank you so much to everybody for being a part of memorializing the dialogue and being a part of such an important conversation. Thank you again, Ambassador, for hosting us, and we look forward to these conversations.
Thank you so much, and see you on July the 2nd.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice week.